Welcome back. We're in conversation with Thomas Dohmke, the Global CEO of GitHub. We're learning more about generative AI, AI in general, and of course, Copilot, what that will translate into as far as the Indian market is concerned. Thomas, let's also talk about regulation. I think anytime we talk about development of AI, this conversation is had in parallel with the need to regulate it. But more recently, the one distinct shift that at least I personally have seen is that the conversation has shifted from ethical AI and from training of AI models to also talking about concentration of AI tech in the hands of a few companies. I'm given to understand there are leaders here from the government side that are looking at it in India, the US, the Department of Justice, the FDA, in Europe as well. They're looking at it. How would you respond to these concerns and fears being expressed by government institutions on narrowing down of the leading AI technology in a few hands?
On the one side, of course, at Microsoft, we are pushing really hard, to be one of the leaders in this age of AI, in this age of Copilot. And we're really proud of the innovation that we have delivered in the last year. On the other side, if you actually look out there, both in the news and in the community, there has been so much competition heating up. There's both more open source model, there's closed source models, there's hybrid efforts where developers take some of these open source models and fine tune them for their specific use cases. So I'd say, the competition has never been stronger in this space, in this generative AI space. And there's something new literally every day, if not even more often. Like sometimes it's by the hour that some innovation is happening. There's AI companies in Paris with Mistral as an example. Stable Diffusion was developed in partnership between universities in Germany and in the United Kingdom. We have, of course, a lot of open source work happening on the US West Coast. And here in India, we're seeing a lot of innovation. So I think competition is really strong, and we're going to only see more of that in the coming months and years.
You speak of competition. Let me bring in one aspect of competition. One company that is not seeing a lot of competition is Nvidia. I think they're very highly in demand. I think more recently they've crossed the $3 trillion market cap level. I just want to get your thoughts. Looking at it from a challenge perspective, of course, training of these AI models require GPUs. Is that a concern? Is that a challenge for you in terms of getting the GPUs from Nvidia? It's become a scarce resource as far as AI development is concerned. So just your thoughts on Nvidia and the huge demand that exists, which outstrips the supply that we currently have.
Nvidia clearly had a head start in this age of AI, but it's also easy to forget that a few years ago, Nvidia had to write off a number of their GPUs that they had produced for the crypto boom that was happening back then. So these things change fast. We see other companies pushing now to also build powerful GPUs, whether it's partners like Intel or AMD, whether it's, I think, 24 or so silicon startups that are back in Silicon Valley. I think for the first time in a long time, we can now say that Silicon Valley actually has silicon companies again. They're developing chips that are optimized for transformer models. And I think we're going to see more competition in that space as well. And of course, Nvidia will do their best to sustain their lead for the longest time. But I think whether it's at that part of the stack, in GPUs, whether it's a level higher at the model stack, or whether it's at the responsible AI, ethical use of AI, and of course at the application at the Copilot layer of the stack, there's competition elsewhere. And the energy that I'm seeing is both incredible and exciting. I don't think we have seen anything like that since the birth of the internet in the early 90s, when the world changed around us. And if you and I would travel back, to 1993 and try to predict what life would be like we have it now in 2024, we probably would have been way off from what our life is actually like.
Interesting. Given that we are speaking of Nvidia, I can't help us but have this conversation. We have it in the newsrooms, conversations about how Nvidia may exceed the market cap for Microsoft as well. Is that something that inspires maybe coffee room conversations inside closed doors, inside boardrooms? Is that something that a conversation you've had in terms of Nvidia overtaking Microsoft?
I don't think the market capitalization is on our mind on a day-to-day basis. I think we have so much energy of focusing on the value that we can provide to our customers, on what we can do next for GitHub Copilot, for all the Copilots at Microsoft, and ultimately, specifically for GitHub, we're really obsessed about software developers. We have the saying at GitHub, we always put the developer first. That is part of our mindset, part of our culture. And so whether it's in talking with you today, whether it's in talking with customers here in India, or next week with thousands of developers in Bengaluru, that is what excites me. That's what top of mind. And I want to make the world better through software, through enabling developers to drive human progress.
Interesting. You talked about developer community, you talked about India. Let's bring the conversation back here. What does the GitHub footprint in India look like a year from now, 2 years from now? Can you give us a picture? Early half of 2023, we saw a few job cuts. Is the tide past that? Are we looking at more investments? Are we looking at greater hiring? What does the footprint for GitHub in India look like?
Yeah, we had to make a hard decision early 2023 to lay off some developers here in India, not because they were in India, but because they were working on areas of our product that we had to de-scope, to be able to focus on AI and react to the economic environment. But that said, Microsoft has a long tradition here in India with over 20,000 developers or 20,000 employees, many of them developers in Hyderabad in our India Development Center. And we at GitHub collaborate with many of those developers on AI, on Copilot, on building agents for that next age of AI. I think in the coming years we will deepen that investment. We will collaborate with partners here in New Delhi and elsewhere. For example, we recently announced our Copilot extension program, where other companies can build within the Copilot stack and extend the knowledge that Copilot Chat has with their software, with their cloud system. One such example is Lambda Test, a company here, a startup here of New Delhi that enables developers to do web and mobile testing. And they now integrate into our Copilot to enable developers not to only ask generic programming questions or questions around their code, but also questions around all the other systems that sit in their stack.
That's so interesting. Let me also then talk about engagement and traction within the startup community. You mentioned Copilot, you mentioned Copilot Enterprise. Are you seeing greater traction? And are there any names that you would like to share in terms of partners, companies, startups that you're working with here in the Indian market?
So the interesting thing I think about Copilot over the last few years has been that it's really new technology. AI is still the cutting edge, yet we have seen many large companies across many industries already adopting it, whether it's Infosys and Cognizant, whether it's Paytm or Make My Trip, and maybe hundreds of startups and old companies both equally have adopted GitHub Copilot. And that makes us really excited about this future of generative AI. It's not this one-off thing that has still proved itself, that still has to cross the chasm as we stay. I think we're already past that point where it's proven that technology will make developers' life better. And I think, as we head forward, any Indian company that's developing software, any software development company will have many Copilots in their workforce.
Let's go ahead, and this is my final question here. With respect to the Indian market, what is the kind of traction that you're hoping for? What is the kind of expectations that you have? Any numbers that you would like to drop on this journey forward? And what the next leg of growth in India for you looks like?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, I think we want to see this happening. We want to see that 2027, India is becoming the largest developer community on the planet. We want to see, maybe in the future, the next Microsoft or the next big tech company coming out of Mumbai or coming out of Bangalore. Maybe they're coming out of Rio de Janeiro or out of Paris as well, right? I think we want to see that the democratization of software development is actually happening, that the human language empowers everyone who wants to build software to be able to do that. And specifically here in India, we want to see, more. We want to see more students learning coding. We want to see more startups, building cool technology. We want to see that Indian large language model from happening. And of course, we want to see more engagement with the GitHub community.
Interesting. I know I said the last question. I'll try to just squeeze in time, a couple more minutes to ask you one final question. India is among the many countries that is looking at a framework that will provide guardrails, yet at the same time provide room for innovation. Broadly speaking, if you could narrow down perhaps one or two suggestions that you would give to the government in terms of what an ideal framework should look like.
For us as GitHub, one of the most important things about regulation is to make sure that open source, that research can still happen in an unconstrained or almost unconstrained way. If you're, a single developer in Hyderabad that wants to work on a large language model or an AI project, you don't have the means to build out a large compliance team or to pay a lawyer to make sure you're compliant with all the regulations. Big companies can do that, and they should be doing that, and the government should hold them accountable. But open source development, the open source community should be able to collaborate on a free basis to create, the innovation that we need to drive human progress. I think the other question that many countries need to ask themselves is, how does our regulation compare with those of our partners? Here in India, we know with many companies are international. They're operating in many markets, including my home country, Germany, the United States, and many other places. And so regulation, if it's not harmonized across these markets, means that developers, when they're using a Copilot, get different benefits. And so we might have an unfair race between these developers using Copilot in Berlin versus the developers in Bangalore. And I think that's not what we want. We don't want an unfair competition. As in any sport, we want to have a level playing field. And I think that's really important to think about when governments create regulation, enable open source and open research, and make sure that you're not putting yourself in a position that that puts other countries in a favorable position.
Thomas, it's been such an engaging conversation to understand where AI is positioned as we speak and where it's headed from here. A lot of interesting insights into what India could do with this technology and what perhaps it needs to do to benefit from it, to exploit from it. Thomas, I'd like to thank you once again for taking our time, for sharing this time with us, and for sharing your insights. We hope to continue this conversation the next time you're here. We'd love to interact with you again. But for now, thank you so much for being a part of this.
Thank you so much for the great conversation.